Hey, I'm Nick Frederking, agrigold agronomist here in southern Illinois. We're into the middle of May and our crops are finally emerging. I saw this really cool statistic given out by Illinois Corn on May 7th. Over 70% of our corn was planted, but only 7% was emerged. Now, if you're not from the Illinois area, you may think that, boy, those guys had 10 good days and they slammed it in the ground hard. It just hasn't come up yet. But we know, in fact, most of the planting in our area started sometime in the beginning of April. And we just averaged like 14 days to get that corn and beans up and emerged. We were dealing with some very cool soils. Now, we've had some replant claims come in because of those cool soils. You know, I think if we planted somewhere in that 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th of April, we probably subjected those crops to that cooling injury that we talked about earlier in the season. We've had some people dealing with some crusting out in some soils, but no black and white replant claimed. It's all been gray. You know, 10, 15, 20% loss of plant stand, which really changes the conversation about replant, talking about what our yield goals are based on what our population is. So those have been rolling in, but I think today we've got some pretty good emergence happening around the area. We do have a large amount of acres in the ground and already planted. But even if we have emergence of our crops, we're not out of the woods yet. There's still some things that we need to scout for to establish how healthy that crop is going to be going throughout the season. So what I'm thinking about today is the stuff planted beginning and middle of April and the longevity of the seed treatment that we had on those corn and soybean seedlings. That seed treatment on corn and soybean is meant to protect us for the first 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks of that young crop's life. And as we look at that early planting through April, we get to today, we're past the 4-week mark. Some of these young seedlings, these young corn and soybean plants are still pretty small and we're still growing relatively slow. So we may be at risk for some different things out in the field. So if you want to come with me, we're gonna go out in the field and take a look at some of the things I'm a little bit cautious about moving forward. So now we're out in the field, we're scouting our plants, noticing that they all look healthy, green, and intact, but whoa, what is that little thing? That doesn't look good, doesn't look healthy. Keep looking down the row. Hey, make sure we're out there scouting these fields, because if we see plants like this, we need to dig them up and assess. Early season insect and disease pressure is a very real thing. So as we dig this sucker up out in the field, I want to show you what you should be assessing for out in your fields. I don't know if I caught it on camera or not, but when you dig these things up, you need to look for the little booger that's in this dirt clod right here. I'll expose him in a second. As we pull this plant out, kind of corkscrewed a little bit, aren't we? We notice this plant because the growing point or the interior of this plant is necrotic. That's a problem. First thing I want to check is seed to plant. Is this white piece, the mesocotyl, or the umbilical cord, if you will, is this piece white, firm, and intact? Sure looks like it. A little corkscrew there, but it isn't firm and intact. As you move up the plant, do you see anything that's a problem? I sure do. There's a hole right there through the crown, or where the growing point would be at. And that is a big problem, because that's going to be certain death to this young corn plant. And the culprit was actually in the furrow when we dug this baby up. And we're going to expose him red-handed right now. Look at that guy. Look at that guy. That's a bad boy there. Wireworm. Wireworm and white grub pressure are really picking up right now because we've got some moisture in our soils and they're staying cool. So this little guy right here was responsible for digging a hole through that growing point and killing this plant. He just wants to eat, but it's not doing us any favors. Now that plant was pretty easy to detect because of that necrotic top, but if we jump over just a couple of rows, we still got some green plants down the row, right? Then we get to a plant like this. it looks a little droopy. It's just not quite as healthy looking as some of the other plants in the same row. So very similarly, we should dig this one up as well. And we'll probably notice that this is just in the earlier stages of death, where the other one was a little further along. As we dig this guy up, same thing, we want to make sure we don't miss the culprit if he's in there. We'll expose it, pull the plant out. We're going to do a very similar assessment. We want to look again from the seed up to the plant with that mesocotyl. Is it white, firm, intact? Yep, no discoloration. But sure enough, there's a little hole there. This has been fed on as well. Now the problem is, if any feeding would have occurred down here, we might have been able to make it through, because these roots on top are nodal roots, our primary roots. They would support the plant through that stress. Wouldn't be good for the plant, but potentially could make it. But that feeding that goes right through that crown or that growing point is going to be the demise of these corn plants. So I think about what we can do to protect ourselves from that, and you already did it. This pink colorant on the seed, that's the seed treatment, right? That's meant to protect us really for the first 2-3 weeks. And as you look at these plants, you may notice that they're around that V3 mark down the row. These were planted early to mid-April, and today we're sitting almost at the middle of May. So a lot of the activity from that seed treatment is worn off, and now these plants are going to be subject to that pressure. So if you've got planting around the middle of April, maybe even the 3rd week of April, start doing the math on that 3-week timetable for the active ingredients in that seed treatment, and start scouting your plants, because you very well may have issues like we're seeing out here in the field today with the death of these young plants. You know, we might have taken stand counts at emergence in this field. Certainly won't be the final stand in this field because of the insect and disease pressure that we're looking at today. So that'd be your tip for the week. So as we come back out of the field, I just want to recap that even though we have emergence, it doesn't mean that we can stop scouting. So as you guys hop on your side-by-sides and four-wheelers, drive to the field, and just admire all that hard work that you put in to get that crop out. Doesn't take but a couple minutes to dig these little plants up and evaluate those critical spots between seed and plant. Make sure this piece is white and firm on that mesocotyl, and we don't have any holes of chewing or anything through that plant. We want to be able to identify what our plant stands are today, and if we can expect to lose some plants moving forward. So the big concerns today would be insect pressure and disease pressure. Obviously insect pressure, we're going to see chewing and feeding on these young roots and young plant parts. Disease, we'd see this mesocotyl decayed, discolored, or just deteriorated in general. So make sure you're scouting. Understand that the seed treatment is good early on, but the cool conditions that we planted into does have some associated risks. That would be the increased pressure of pests and disease. The seed treatment lasting 2-3 weeks is not a knock on the seed treatment. That's just the normal life cycle of the active chemistry being metabolized through the plant, degraded in the soil, and that kind of thing. So if you have any questions about any of this or what you should be scouting for, please reach out to your local DSM or myself. We'd be happy to help you. Thank you.